Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm joined by my usual broadcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw, who played 11 seasons for the New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings. This is the Laidlaw and Allen Report. We come to you twice a week to talk all things hockey, and what we're going to talk about on this show, of course, is the upcoming trade deadline next Monday, 3 p.m. Everybody's into it. It's been slow so far, but I know a guy who can stir it up a little bit for us. And that's our good friend Eklund of HockeyBuzz.com, who I've known for a very long time, and always has his fingers on all the crazy rumors and the true rumors that are floating around out there. Ek, welcome to the show, and
Thank you.
hopefully you can help us put a little zest into what has really been a slow trade deadline. In fact, when I've talked to general managers, the first thing they've said is, man, it's quiet for a trade deadline. Not unexpected, though, is it?
It's not unexpected. The flat cap is really messing up the trade deadline. That's the reality of it, right? Because prices always go up, and you can't and there's nowhere to go. And we're going to see a lot, as you know, of trading through third teams and things like that to try to have half as much salary and stuff like that. And I think some of that stuff takes a little bit longer to organize. And also some of those teams are sitting there waiting on, other teams that they might want to trade a third player through too. I think there's just there's always contingency plans, but I've never felt there are more contingency plans than there are this year. Everyone has 3 or 4 contingency plans. And even the teams that are just taking on half a salary and moving a player along have contingency plans. They have their own, well, we might want to do this. We might want to move Giroux. Maybe we'll help with Chychrun. That's that kind of thing. So it's, throwing all the rumors into a pot this morning and stirring them around. It's you can just pick anyone you want, it's kind of it's really hard.
I got to tell you, this reminds me of many, many years ago before people knew who you were. Remember when you first started your rumor mill? That was about the 04-05 lockout, right? So nobody knew who you were at that point. You're in the darkness again. You're in the darkness. Hey, all right. So players it seems like Fleury, I understood said that he doesn't want to go anywhere. Although I was on TSN before we got on the show, and they're saying that they've got him as a guy that still can get traded.
That seemed to have changed again yesterday, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. I felt like, and I mentioned this to Kevin before, when you hear somebody say he will accept a trade, and then somebody else say he wants to stay in Chicago, and you trust both those people, and you're sitting there and saying, okay, and that's happened to me, and I think you too, Kevin, right, in this situation. Yeah. So you're in a spot where you sit there and say, okay, I tend to go towards the less exciting aspect probably being true. He probably just wants to stay in Chicago. That's because people don't usually say, hey, you know what? He doesn't want to go anywhere. That's not an exciting thing to bring to a conversation. So normally that's me. But yesterday, I think it was Pierre LeBrun talked to Alan Walsh and said something, and he posted something about, that they've been in constant communication with Chicago, and they're waiting to, and nothing has been decided yet at all. So is that just an agent saying that? Alan Walsh, sometimes you never know, but I think that it means that at least Walsh wants to keep Fleury's options open. Maybe there's something that comes down the pike here.
Well, don't you think, Ek, that both can be true? I think probably Marc-Andre Fleury is not thinking about continuing getting another postseason run, but he probably could be talked into it. It's like anything else.
Yeah, especially him. That's what happened to go to Chicago in the first place, right? That was what basically he wasn't going anywhere. He wasn't going to accept a trade to Chicago, but he basically he wasn't going to report there. We didn't even know what was going to happen, right? So and then suddenly he went there, and now he might want to stay there. It's interesting. I just think the whole thing, he's a hockey player, right? And if you throw out an option of a team that he thinks could legitimately win a Stanley Cup, if he's there, it's a hard thing to turn away from for a couple months' work,
I guess unlike Ray Bourque way back in the day when he went to Colorado, where he's already won cups, right? So it's not like he is I'm sure he still wants to win. He's a competitive guy, but he has won already. If he's got his family, if he's from a family guy standpoint, he's saying, listen, I don't want to uproot my family or be away from my family again. I'll play out the season. I'll be a free agent at the end of the year. If I want to sign someplace else, I will. If not, I can stay home.
Right.
So over here with the Rangers, then, so Kevin and I got back and forth, and I do agree with Kevin now that the Rangers are trying to do stuff. But I kind of wonder of late, and listen, I love with the direction the team is going, but Are they really ready yet to take a run at it, or is it just Shesterkin has made them? He's covered up a lot of flaws for them.
I think it's again both, like Kevin said, but I think more towards. I lean more towards. I think Gallant's done a heck of a job, and I think Shesterkin is that good. You know, he really is. I'm a goalie myself, and there's very few goalies I kind of fall in love with in the NHL that I just say that's my guy. You know, like obviously everyone loved Hasek. I love Tim Thomas. Tim Thomas was a great I love goalies that play weird styles, and Shesterkin does that. You know, I think he's the big reason, but at the same time, it's kind of wide open for them. You know, and if you can, and they're one of the few teams with money, which also matters. So, you know, they have to save that money, but if they're doing something on a rental basis, why wouldn't they? It's New York, you know, they're not going to sit there and, you know, spend that money on something else. I think that as long as it doesn't mess up the chemistry, right, Tom? And that's like the big thing.
Right. And they do have some pretty good chemistry going on. You're right.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I see.
I mean, one of the names like Pavelski's name was thrown around. He just signed a new deal, right?
Yeah, he signed a new deal. I think that they're heavy in on Jacob Chychrun, which is a long-term thing, which is good. Obviously, that would be something that anybody would be thrilled about getting. The question is what you'd have to give up for him and stuff like that. I keep hearing that, and I know I'm the only person and I know Kevin doesn't even agree with this one, but I keep hearing that Lafreniere's name's been around, and now in terms of something like this, like a Chychrun deal, where something big, major, you know, it's not. I'm not saying they're chopping him at all, but just that if they're looking to get something major, that he could perhaps be he would be a big piece in that, right? So, would Lafreniere for Chychrun straight up be fair for both teams? I kind of think it would be.
But Chychrun, so they've got Lindgren and Fox, Trouba, and
yeah.
So the top four is pretty good. But so
it is pretty good, but you know, you can never have too many good end defensemen. He jumps into your top two right away. You know, like I mean, it's Fox and Chychrun. That's a hell of a combo. Yeah. You know, like if you can put those guys together, and then you got Shesterkin behind that. I mean, you're talking about a team that just, you know, could virtually be impossible to score on. I mean, it really is one of those situations that
I'll tell you what, I hear you. I know it looks like that, but when you hear Gallant talk in press conferences, he's not too happy with some of their defensive play sometimes.
Yeah, no, I like that Gallant is never too happy about anything. I've always liked that about him. You know, he definitely is not too happy about this stuff a lot. But you really have to be kind of happy about the Rangers. I mean, they really are. I mean, they were my team. They were my pick to win the Stanley Cup at the beginning of the year, you know. So.
Oh, they were. Okay, nice.
I got to stay with them. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Yeah.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on the one player that everybody's talking about, probably the number one guy on everyone's trade board is Claude Giroux. You know, we've heard Colorado, we've heard Florida. I've even heard Minnesota, a team that hasn't played as well lately and would like to do something this season. What have you heard about Giroux, just in general terms?
Minnesota is really interesting because of Fletcher's obviously long-time connection to Minnesota, right? And the fact that, you know, he and Leopold are really tight, like owner there. I think it's complicated because Giroux, personality-wise, is not what you'd expect him to be necessarily. I think he's kind of like I always say he's like a Patrick Marleau type player where he likes where he is a lot. And even though he sits back and logically, you know, he knows the Flyers can't bring him back. I think he's at I think some of this is Giroux, why it hasn't happened yet. I think some of it is Giroux just being like, I really want to stay here. How can we make that work? And the Flyers continually saying we can't. And I think that they're in this bind right now. I think Florida and Colorado are both in on them to the point where they could get it done. But I do think that he might lean more towards going to Florida, from what I understand. Personally, like he has a no movement clause, so he could kind of control that to a degree. He might not want to be as far away. Like he is very much a home body type person. I know it's a short period of time, and I think Colorado is probably a better chance to win a cup. But you know there's so much involved here because Giroux is so good and also is so tied to Philadelphia that it's just a hard thing to convince him to do this.
So looking over at Vegas, the culture killer, Jack Eichel. Team
Rock on, Tom. You and I have been the Vegas people who I know I've heard this before, but I heard this from Kevin that you and I said immediately if Mark Stone doesn't return, they will not make the playoffs.
Yeah, 3-7. Yeah, they're no guarantee of making playoffs. Will they try? I know they're right up against it for the cap. Will they try to do anything?
Yeah,
trade deadline to do something.
If they can manage more guys to get on the LGIR, I guess they could. Yeah. That's what it comes down to, that whole
Yeah.
process, which I think is ridiculous. That's a whole other discussion. But yeah, I think I think they will. I mean, I think they're going to try to at
Yeah.
least, and whether or not, I mean, they have an incredibly aggressive owner there who's going to tell McCrimmon, and when he gets something done, McCrimmon's going to say, I don't have any cap base, and the owner's Floyd's going to come back and say, I want to get something done. It's not. It's going to be.
Geez, what happens there if they don't make the playoffs? Oh man,
it's the end of a really bizarre era.
The Leonard thing, Jack Eichel, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, go ahead, Kev.
Oh, I just wanted to, so I didn't know whether you had heard, but Mark Stone and Pietrangelo are out as the leaders of the team. It's all Eichel now.
Right.
Mr.
Completely taken over.
No.
So whatever happens to that
Tom
team,
says. I thought you were serious about that. Okay, yes.
yeah,
Okay.
it's all on.
Tom,
it's
you do
all
not
on-
I don't share your dislike of Eichel at all, but I do have a love of Mark Stone and think he's very important.
I agree.
Yeah,
too. But I have been in the locker room when a big figure comes in that locker room.
Yeah.
People defer to him a little bit, but I agree with you. Stones have been around. Pietrangelo's been a captain, so it's not like these guys are like first time through the door. But I just to me, I look at the Eichel thing. There's something like his comments the other night after they lost to Buffalo, comments about the crowd. I mean, that's
I heard that. Yeah. There's a lot. I mean, he's definitely, I kind of like it because that is actually Jack Eichel to a degree. Like I've heard Jack Eichel off the record talk to people,
right,
and that he is definitely ornery, and he's your typical Boston kid.
Sure.
He is absolutely 100% like a Southie or whatever you call it. He is not gonna spare any punches. But
don't you think though, Tom, those comments were pretty typical? I mean, I could see you in the 1980s doing something like that.
I would certainly be thinking that, but I don't see many guys say that. I mean, Tavares came back to the island here. They were all over him, terrible signs, booing him all the time. Total class.
Yeah, but Tavares' situation was a little bit different. He was beloved while I was there. Eichel, had some issues even in Buffalo. So
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I know what you're saying, and I agree with you. He shouldn't have said it, but
yeah.
I don't think it was totally out of the realm of.
Correct. I guess what I'm looking at is there's a whole. To me, I'm looking at this big picture of Jack Eichel, and I'm thinking, okay, this isn't just one snapshot of who this guy is. It's the pattern with him. But one guy makes one comment one time about it. It's not a big deal. But again, this is just my view. We've talked about this before. I have this negative view of Jack Eichel.
Yeah, but there are a lot of guys who are a little difficult to deal with. Let's look at Boston with Brad Marchand.
Yeah.
Who is creates plenty of messes for the Bruins, and yet I wouldn't say they have a losing culture. Far from it.
Very true.
So,
well, but they've also had Zdeno Chara, Ray Bourque, Patrice Bergeron.
Well, Vegas has,
those
Angelo and Stone.
They haven't seen out the letter then. That they're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a weird spot, right? Because you don't go back in there and get beaten up. Has a team get beaten up and have the fans go crazy the whole time because they were beating up on Jack Eichel. You can see Eichel really being like, you could just, his blood is like, Irish blood burning type thing, that's enough.
Yeah.
You can really see it.
I thought it too. It was just so, didn't Krebs score? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so it's just,
So, not on top of that, but the young guy that they got back for you scores, so.
And the crazy thing of it, I think Eichel Buffalo should have played this differently, and they should have allowed him to have the surgery, and all could have been fine. But
see, that to me, that's really telling tale right there. That's a great point. Like if they really wanted Eichel there, if everything was good there with Eichel, it wouldn't have been handled that way, right? That's the way I see it.
Although they were adamant about that surgery. It's funny, since that's been said and done, I've talked to GMs who said we wouldn't allow them to have that surgery either.
Oh, really?
There were definite insurance issues with. From what I understood, I was kept being told by people like look into the contract and whether the insurance will pay for him. I think the Sabres felt like they could end up being on the hook for his money without insurance paying for it if he had that. I really think that was their biggest fear there.
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay. And didn't a young guy in Chicago just get the same surgery too? Right? Somebody else did. Yeah.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, I thought I heard that today on the NHL radio. But
speaking of Chicago, that's a good segue. Nobody's talking about them other than Marc-Andre Fleury, but I keep hearing that they're considering trading some of their, not the Taves and Kane, but the Hagel, Kubelik, those guys, Strom, obviously. Like, I don't, if that's true, to me, that doesn't make any sense. Why trade the younger guys on a rebuild?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Especially to bring
obviously,
in Fleury and the big defenseman too, right? They try to bolster their team, man.
well, they went for it. They kind of did what Philly did, right? In the same way, like, they went for it and failed. That happens. But and if I'm a fan, I'd rather a team do that than not go for it and fail. But so I don't want to rip Chicago too much, but I think that at the end of the day, you're right, and I think that Strome is the real Dylan Strome is the really interesting one to me. Like, he has talent. He's a center, which is wanted around the league for sure. He's big. He's gotten better, and he, whether they can sign him or not, there is a big question mark because they are up against it. I think, and I've heard, I keep hearing Calgary connected to him, and I think that makes sense because Calgary really is not as strong as they are and as good as they are. They're not that strong up the middle, and if Gaudreau was to go down, they would kind of remind you of Vegas, when they lost all their centers a couple years ago. Like, you really, as strong as you are, you need centers. I think Strome would make sense. I also heard Dylan Strome to New York too, to the Rangers. That's been mentioned as well. So those are two situations that I think both would work for him.
How about Giordano in Seattle? There, he'll probably go someplace, right?
Yeah, I think so. That's one of those teams. That's one of those things where a team's waiting to see if they're going to have to move money through on somebody else type thing. But yeah, I think. I really like the idea of him in Toronto, but it's a big. But there's that big thing, and that's something I want to ask you, Kevin. Tom, is like, it makes me insane, this whole right-handed, left-handed defenseman thing.
Yeah. See, to me, for some strange reason, a left-handed defenseman could play the right or left side. A right-handed defenseman can't play the left side for some reason.
Well, I think that's because there weren't that many right-handed defensemen, right? So a lot of the left-handed defensemen probably had to play the right side.
Yeah, for me, I like both the same. There's advantages playing both sides.
Right.
So
why is it like they look at Giordano and, my friend Mike from our other podcast sits there and says, no, there's no way they would bring Giordano in because he's a left-handed shooter.
Not true. I would not say that to him at all. Like, no disrespect to
Mike.
Mike.
No, I agree. I don't.
You think back to the Montreal Canadiens winning all their cups in the late 70s, all left shot defensemen. Those guys were all left. 6 guys. Right, like maybe Rich Chartrand was there as a right shot, but.
Now, it's interesting. I talked to a team yesterday who is looking for a left-handed defenseman and has too many right-handed defensemen, which is really interesting. That is maybe a little bit more reality because the right-handed defensemen haven't had to play the left side very often, I guess.
Yeah. I don't see why when hear people say that after having done it, there's no reason why. That's a fallacy. I don't know where that comes. I hear
coaches are the ones that changed it. It used to be they didn't have any problem with it, but now coaches all the time talk about needing right shot defenseman.
You're right. Sorry, yeah.
Isn't there a bit of an advantage, Tom, to I know the idea is you're right-handed, you're on the right side, you can keep the puck along the boards better, but you shouldn't be using your stick anyway, right? On a shot wrapped around the board, you should be getting up against the boards and blocking it. Yeah. And isn't there an advantage to having your stick further towards the middle of the ice, and having that angle?
Well, even coming out of your own zone, because basically you're opened up now, and if you're left shot on the right side, you're opened up and you see the ice a lot better.
Yeah, I would think so.
There's a lot of it. Now, in the old days, too, when you can hook and hold, if a guy went wide on you and you turn now, if you're left shot defenseman, now your stick's against the board, so you can hook better. You can't do that now. So that could be some of the stuff. So maybe it is a little bit different. But to me,
I think it was Jacques Lemaire. I could be wrong on this. Maybe someone will know out there, but I can't remember exactly. But it seems to me Lemaire always, especially on the penalty kill, would cheat, leave open the backhand passes and, put all this pressure on the guys that could do the forehand. So forcing you into always having to make a backhand pass if you're going to make a big play.
That's interesting. I like that.
Well, that's the same thing like when Gretzky used to set up in his office behind the net there. There really wasn't much you could do. He was so good. But the one thing you tried to do was force him out on his backhand. But he could pass the puck well enough for his backhand that didn't really matter. That was your one option to try to stop.
Yeah, that was your better case scenario.
That's how bad it was. How easy it
was. We would talk about it all the time. Okay, this is when both guys can't go back there. But whenever especially if you didn't play him very often, when he's behind the net there, and everybody's seen this play so many times, and you can say to yourself before the game, don't both guys go after him. Both guys are still going after him. When you play them enough times, you realize, okay, don't do that. But you get so excited out there, you want to stop.
Well, we're running out of time with that, but I want to ask him because another team that I think is really planning to be aggressive. Who knows what'll happen? But I think that's the Boston Bruins. They've been also heavily into the Chychrun, scenario. Also, I think they were interested in a forward. they really want to upgrade. They want to go for it. They've got two older players who are premium players in Bergeron and Marchand, and they would like to do it. And they have a long tradition of good defense, so they want to even strengthen it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the defense is definitely where they're looking. Chychrun, I've kind of almost have them as a favorite for Sherratt when I talked to people yesterday, which I think is always interesting when Montreal and Buffalo make a deal, Montreal and Boston make a deal together. But they definitely want to do that. I think Sherratt is overrated, by the way. I don't know. That's another question for another day. But that's a guy that I think has gotten a little too much hype.
And some people say that about Chychrun too. There's people have their doubts about Chychrun.
Really?
Yeah, it's kind of like 1 year, one good year, one so-so year.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough one. It's with him in Phoenix too. I mean, who knows? It's like, but yeah, I think Boston always is a fun team to watch because they will go for it. Their fans demand they go for it, and which I like. Marchand and Bergevin, they're not on the downside of their careers. It feels like they're still climbing. I mean, Marchand's getting better all the time. Bergevin maybe a little bit, but I mean, it's like my gosh, they're still good, really, really good older players.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Well, Eklund, it's always a pleasure to have you on, especially around trade deadline time to get all the latest rumors and gossip of what's happening around the NHL. And you and I are going to talk later today.
Yes, indeed.
Yep, I'll give you a call.
All right. Just again.
We'll talk soon. Bye.
That was Eklund from Hockey Buzz, whose entire site is dedicated to trade rumors.
And you got to go read it to be sure, because he's got that system, right, where it's like an E5 is just a
yeah. Although that's through the years, that's sort of, in my opinion, sort of moved aside. Now it's more into But the one thing about it, it's unfiltered. In other words, like, he doesn't make a judgment call. If he hears a rumor, he puts it up. He doesn't. In the real journalism world, you've got to use. At least I do. Try to figure out, well, does that make any sense, or whatever. And he just says, that's not my job. My job is to put up what I hear, and just puts it up there and lets the readers decide.
It brings up a good point here, Kev. Sorry about Chychrun too. He got hurt last night too, and I guess he flew back to around the road, so he flew back to Phoenix to get looked at. So. Yeah,
the one thing that's a good, I didn't hear that actually, but Susan's always on top of things.
Yes, she is.
So,
yes, she is.
She's a great hockey insider.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah. But they don't have to trade him now, and I keep pointing this out to people. Like, everyone thinks who does Chychrun going to go to? Well, he doesn't have to go to anyone. They can trade him this summer. In fact, I think they would be better off
get more
trading him this summer, right? Because I think then right now, teams like the Rangers and the Boston Bruins are both hamstrung in terms of what they can give up. They'll be less so in the offseason.
Yeah, totally. I agree. I still am baffled though why they want to trade him in the first place. He's got a decent contract.
Right. No, and that's the I try to explain, that's the lure of Chychrun. It's not just that he is a fiend in the weight room, and he's a big guy and he scored 18 goals last year. But really, what's important is he's making under $5 million for 3 seasons.
Yeah,
that's just part of today's game. Having someone in at a reasonable price. He's not making $6 million or $7 million or $8 million,
or that $9 million that some of those guys are making.
Yeah. So that's a part of the lure on him as well. I don't see. I disagree. He brought that up, that Eklund and I disagree about the Rangers giving up Lafreniere. I don't see that happening. So
I could see Capo Caco or Hedl.
Oh, for sure. To me, that's probably what's going on.
Yeah.
If they're in negotiations, they're probably pushing him, and the Coyotes are saying we want Lafreniere. So, because from what we're hearing, they're going for all the top players. When they talk to the Red Wings, they want Mo Seider, and when they
Phoenix does.
Yeah, and rightfully so. Like, people seem mad about that. I think that's totally reasonable.
Absolutely. Like you said before, you don't have to trade them. So ask for everything.
Right. You just ask for whatever you think it's worth. Now, it's up to you to say no. The reason you didn't make $5 million a year is because they wouldn't give it to you.
Yeah.
I mean, but you would have taken it.
Yep.
If they would offer you $5 million, you wouldn't have said, "Well, no, I'm not worth that."
I can't do that.
That's what Al Kaline did here in Detroit for the Detroit Tigers.
Really?
The first time they offered him $100,000, he goes, "No, I can't take that. That's just too much money."
Is that right? That's
yeah. It was it's a famous story.
That's pretty good. Susan asked a good question here. Matthews, did you see the cross check last night?
I think he's going to get suspended.
Yeah.
So
it wasn't as bad, but I think back to when Dave Brown cross-checked Thomas Sandstrom. He got 10 games for that. Now that was worse. I think Sandstrom wasn't even looking. I don't think he got him on the side of the face. But that was surprising.
When I watched that this morning and anticipated the fact I was going to have to talk about it in podcasts and stuff. What I realized? I'm just so weary about talking about those things. I just, and it's not like there's been too many this year, but why is that still part of the game? Why, we're just constantly, it seems like we're constantly having to assess, what these guys did. I know it's a competitive game, but
I guess what I just talked about a cross checking from years ago when I played, but I also do think there's more of that stuff now because there's not as much fighting.
Yeah,
if it wasn't a day where Matthews got mad at whoever it was, Dahlin or Rasmus Dahlin, I think it was whoever, they would have dropped their gloves and gone at it. So there wouldn't have been a cross check most times. There was, in Dave Brown's case where he cross checked Thomas Sandstrom, he knew that Sandstrom wasn't going to fight him, so his only alternative to get him, that's how he decided to get it. But in most cases, that just didn't happen. But
yeah, I understand. I guess it's frustration, and there's no other way to. Send a message, and it's a complicated thing. On the other hand, you would think, like, the one thing I've noticed, and every time we have what is considered a significant rule change, it doesn't take players all that long to adapt. I remember when they took out all the you couldn't hold the guy up coming into the zone and all that. I thought, my God, that's going to take years to break that, and it really didn't. They had a month or so of problems, and then they figured it out. The guys stopped doing it.
I know. I remember, and I was one of those people that was probably saying it too. Oh, this is going to ruin the game. They changed the game. That's not going to work. Yeah, guys figured it out. Yeah.
No, they do figure it out, and they find a way to do it. But it just seems like we still have guys just making plays like you're thinking, like, what are you thinking?
To me, it's a selfish play by Matthews. He's the best player on the team. Maybe some people are the best player in the league or one of the best players. He certainly is one of the best players in the league. That's one of my concerns with the Toronto team. There's no question about the talent. There's some questions about their defense and their goaltending right now, but as far as forwards go, and I know it's a somewhat meaningless game late in the season or later in the season, but still, that's the kind of stuff you want to be a leader on the team. Get that guy back later on. Like that's to me, that's a selfish play by Matthews.
Yeah, and I think their goaltending problems are real. You look at Campbell's save percentage, dating back to December, it hasn't been very good.
I know.
Turns out he's had just a few good weeks of really elite level play, and then that save percentage has been eroded over time, which tells you, he hasn't played all that well. And
I like Mrazek in the past, but he's really struggled too. Like he hasn't.
No, I know. And he's been injured. There's been some issues there. So it's, no surprise. Goaltending is always a big part of what's going to happen in the playoffs, and it will be again this season. Yeah. So
now speaking of being surprised, Kotkaniemi in Carolina has agreed to an 8-year deal, just under $5 million a year. Is that surprising?
Yes. Doesn't it seem like too much money?
I guess the advantage you've got from the team's end is that, okay, what if this guy takes off and gets better and better? $5 million a year would look like a good deal down the road.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's why it is a good deal, is because it's scary on both ends.
Yes.
Right. If he turns out to be a player, but what's he got this year? 15 goals.
Yeah, he hasn't really lit it up. He hasn't been bad.
Oh yeah, well, and didn't stay on the top line. Like I think he's down on the third and fourth line. So
you know what's going to happen? People are going to say, okay, was this deal already talked about before he signed the 1-year deal?
Is that why they're paying him, more money than?
Right.
Let me see how many goals does he have here?
So everybody knows. So Kotkaniemi, he's the one that was in Montreal, signed with Carolina. The Montreal team then had the option to match the offer. They did not do that, and they got draft picks back in return. And people were always speculating because it was just a one-year deal. Typically, when somebody leaves another team as a restricted free agent on an offer sheet, it'll be a bigger deal than just a one-year deal. So people were speculating that they agreed, they had a little side agreement that they would sign later on down the road, they would sign a longer-term deal, which they did. Now, there's really, I mean, there's nothing in writing, so you really can't, I don't think anything can be done about that, but that's what people are going to talk about.
Well, this is evidence that to suggest that you may be right. First of all, he only has 11 goals, so I was way off. 23 points, 56 games. I mean, he's 21 years old, so I don't think that's horrendous numbers or anything. But over the last 5 games when I check, he's playing 10 minutes a game. He's played under 10 in 2 of those games.
Yeah.
If you're pleasing the coach, you're not playing under 10 minutes a game.
Definitely.
So, it does sound like that was a pre-arranged deal.
Which really, I mean, I guess they're not supposed to do that. But the only contract that's a valid contract is a contract that's signed and registered for the league. So you can have some kind of side agreement. I guess there's really nothing wrong with it. But
yeah.
How about Buffalo, the team you like, that I'm now starting to come around to the coaching and everything, beats Vegas 3-1 and then beats Toronto.
Yeah, and an outdoor game too. Exciting game. People get up for those. I don't think Buffalo has turned it around yet, but they're pointed in the right direction. And I'm giving Kevyn Adams, he didn't hit home run with every trade he made, but he hit some home runs on some.
I heard somebody talking on the radio about them too. And one thing that I haven't really noticed is there's no drama there now. They may not said they're not one of the top teams in the league yet, but all that other nonsense seems to have stopped, right? They've got a solid GM.
Yeah, and Granato was a guy that they've had some situations there with coaches that where there was a lack of connection between coaches and players. That will not be with Donnie Granato.
Yeah, totally.
He just is a guy that connects. Not everybody will love him because nobody, it's sort of like a parent. Everyone hates their parents, and now you hate yours too, as the popular song goes.
Sure.
And that's the way it is with coaches. At various times, you're not real pleased with how the coach is playing you and whatever. So, but there's not going to be any drama with it. First of all, if there's going to be a problem, he's going to call you in, and you're going to talk about it like men, because that's just who he is. It'll kind of all work out. It'll be interesting to see now. And some guys have stepped up. Thompson really has been a much better player now under Granato than he was before. Skinner has suddenly rediscovered his game, playing better, not like he did in the past. So they've had and Dahlin is now taking a step up. I watched him last game. I watched Buffalo play. I thought he was outstanding.
Yes, I agree. I agree totally.
So there's signs there that are good. Now they've got to draft well, and Jack Quinn is going to be a real player. He's going to be an excellent difference maker.
We need to cut to the important stuff, though. Okay, did you see my meal yesterday?
I did not, but my wife did, and
I saw that you liked it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm carrying a message from her. She looked at it. She said, she's a vegan, but she said that really looked good. She really liked how it all came together. The only thing I would say is I'm shocked that you would have corned beef because it's so sodium driven.
I know. I love corned beef too. I have it one time a year at St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, I've had. We haven't talked about sodium much, but I have sodium is an evil for me, as so my doctor tells me.
Yeah.
He asked me to try to live under 200 or 2,000 milligrams of sodium a day. God, that's hard. That's harder than almost anything else you're trying to do. And I looked up before I came on the show because I knew we'd talk about. What do you think 3 ounces of corned beef has in sodium?
You know what? I didn't even want to look at the dietary stats.
Yeah.
So I know how bad
Yeah.
it is. What was it?
It's
What was
over
it?
900.
Oh, is that right?
Over 900 milligrams for 3 ounces of corned beef. So, you could shoot real easily my daily
Yeah.
allotment on a one corned beef sandwich. So,
I know. It was
Yeah.
good. I was really surprised. I got a recipe. I changed the recipe a little bit, but I was really surprised. So I took potatoes and julienne things, you make them up, and so use those for the nacho chips instead of regular nacho chips. It was good. The meal was good.
yeah, Terry said it really looked great. So,
Yeah, I was surprised,
Yeah.
but it was not the healthiest meal either. I had some sour cream on there.
well, unlike me, you have a license to kill every once in a while with all
Right.
those workouts that you do.
Yeah.
Like if you want to splurge every once in a while.
And I do need a little update. So we had our Friday event, the Skate with the Greats down at Chelsea Piers in Manhattan. Great event. They raised over $800,000, not just last night, but for the Ronald McDonald House in New York. And it was funny because Jackie DiPiazza, who we talked about, a very wonderful young lady. She's the one that sets up all alumni stuff. She had heard that I was going to make some comments about Duguay, Sarah Palin. She goes, Tom, you can't do that. So the gentleman that was running the event, I went to him. I was joking around. I said, hey, I got to say a few things about Duguay. He looks at me and goes, no, it's not happening. So there was no comments about Ron Duguay at all. So,
Yeah, well, that was a wise move.
yes, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So, because not everybody understands the hockey humor.
I know. I could tell he really nice guy, this Jerome. He was running the event, and you could tell when he looked at me when I was telling him what I was saying, he thought there's something totally wrong with me. Honestly, he just
they don't get people don't get the hockey thing. Yeah. So, you guys in the if people see you in the context of a dressing room, they might not even recognize you guys.
No. They wouldn't want to recognize us, yes.
So it's really hard to explain to people. So
yeah, it is true.
Or the other thing too, you read the thing that's always shocking to people. I have met, people who have met players and, said, oh my God, they're just the most wonderful guys. And then they've watched them play a couple of times and, what they're willing to do in the name of hockey. And it's really hard for them to cross over because, unlike football where, you hit a guy hard, but you're trying to bring him down.
Right.
But in hockey, we do have plays where you're trying to hurt the guy.
Yeah. And even more so in the past too. That was your goal, to hurt people. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's hard. That's hard to explain to people. So, and we've had this discussion before, but always bears when I covered both the NFL and hockey at the same time. I do a game NFL. I ended up talking to some players, one of whom was all pro, about he had seen his first hockey game and was just flabbergasted by fighting.
Right.
Because someone had told him, well, those are the guys we call the tough guys. And so he stopped me and he goes, I heard you're the hockey guy. Explain this to me. And I explained that, there's tough guys. And then he goes, in our sport, it's the exact opposite. Like the guys that can't play physical and can't take it, they got to fight. Right. So to us, they're the wimps. Yeah. The guys that can't take it, they got to fight. They can't just take it and put their head down and bash the next play. And I said, nah, that's not the way it is in hockey. So, those guys are not the wimps.
Yeah.
So anyway. We've paddled on here for maybe a little long, but we appreciate you tuning in.
And
you want to read me?
When's the deadline?
Next Monday, 3 p.m.
Okay.
So we got another Wednesday to talk about it. I wouldn't be. Maybe we'll have a trade before then. Do you think? I mean, usually you have multiple trades by now.
I have a feeling there's not going to be a whole lot, but
I think there'll be some though. Yeah, we've had trade deadlines where those guys. I always feel sorry for them on television. They sit there for 3 hours.
Right.
You're doing gavel to gavel coverage, and for the first 3 hours, nobody's moving.
Yeah.
So we might have one of those days, but I think in the end we'll have. I think the right guys will move, and there'll be a couple of surprises. I think.
Yep, I agree. There will be surprises. I agree with that.
Yeah, but we might not have 25.
Like
we've got in the past. So,
so maybe we should do a little wager. Do you think Vegas is going to make the playoffs? Yes or no?
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
I'm terrible. I guess because I've been on this thing for so long, it's kind of like maybe I'm hoping they don't, which is not the right way to look at it. I think they're a much better team. They shouldn't be battling for a playoff spot right now.
Well, you have a right to feel that way because they fired your man Gallant, and he is your man. So
he is my man, and even George McPhee, who's one of my other men. Well, it's not like he got fired, but he got moved up to president. So
yeah, isn't it? I don't know. There's nothing worse than getting kicked upstairs.
I know.
Yeah. I mean, seriously though, you get a raise and you got a fancier title, but you're not in the action.
Well, that is the part of it that you wonder because George likes being in the action, but
yeah, I don't know. I'll have to talk to him about it sometime. So sure. You should too. Like, how much is he involved? And so I think the owner there, by the way, is pretty involved.
Yes, I'm sure he's not too happy right now. Right?
No.
Had so many good things happen there, and all of a sudden they make a lot of these moves. You almost wonder, did Kelly McCrimmon outsmart himself with all the moves he's made?
By the way, just real quick, my grandson, 3-year-old Archer Demick, yesterday got engaged with golf, and he got engaged because we're playing the Tournament of Champions in the famed golf course with the 17th hole surrounded by water.
Right.
And I was watching, and of course it's like you're waiting for them to fail. You're sort of rooting for more balls in the water, and of course as each ball go in the water, I'd say splish splash, taking a bath. And my 3-year-old thought that was the most clever thing he ever heard in his entire life.
All right, that's
and
good.
I just started laughing. And so then he would wait, and the ball would go in the water, and he'd say splish splash, taking a bath, and he was so into that. All of a sudden I started talking to him about golf and all that kind of stuff, and those are the memories that you have with your grandkids is doing things like that. So it was fun.
Good stuff. All right. So we will again. If you give your closing there, people need to know where they can read you.
Yeah, you can read me at HockeyBuzz.com and DetroitHockeyNow.com.
Again, if you want to listen to the radio version of this show, you can go to radio.co at 365 Sports. We'll see you everybody on Wednesday. Hopefully, we'll have some trades to talk about.